Hey you, watching this video, spread love.
Hey familia, today's video is sponsored by YouTube Memberships. YouTube Memberships allows you to partner up with your favorite YouTubers and gain access to all kinds of perks. To become a member, click the join button below. Bienvenidos and welcome familia to another awesome podcast. Today's going to be really interesting. I am Leonardo Torres.
I'm Erika Ayala.
And together we are Leo and Erika, and Mustachio. Yes. Mustachio is still here. The mission is still on, and the mission is to get to 100,000 subscribers. And we'd like to thank you all so much for helping us get there. We're almost at 75,000. Can you believe that? 75.
Almost there.
Almost there.
Yeah.
We're really, really close. Quick shout out to Jackie in the house. Welcome to the live chat. Hi, Jackie. Roger Ridge in the house. Any relation? We have TD Watts in the house. Linda, you made it.
3 a.m.
3 a.m. for Linda in Germany. Mama Bear in the house, and Dori in the house too.
Marita.
David Wellman, Angela, welcome. Kobe, welcome. Oh, we got a good crowd here. All right, so we're going to give you all a few minutes to share this on Facebook so that we can get some more beautiful people on here. We're going to give them some time to show up because not everybody shows up on time, right? Am I the only one? Like on parties, whenever you go to parties, they say 3 o'clock and you show up.
That's what you always tell them, like not the exact time. You have to tell them the time like later.
You got to give them like
a couple hours
we say
before.
The Mexican time.
Yeah, a couple hours before, because then they'll get there at the right time.
Yeah, you tell them it's 3, and then you got to tell them what? 12, 1 o'clock?
Like around 12:30, 1 o'clock. So you get there at 3.
And they get there at 3. That's right. All right, so we are excited for today's episode because today we have a therapist who works with family and is marriage and family therapy, but she specializes particularly with childhood trauma. So if you or someone you know is dealing with childhood trauma, maybe you have some questions surrounding childhood trauma, hopefully we're going to get you some good information and share some tools that will help you better understand what trauma is and learn how to live trauma-free. I like that she has on her page, Trauma-Free Nation.
Nice. I'm going to follow. I want to see.
Yeah, you should. Everybody should follow. We'll have like links in the description down below, and we're gonna get into this some good info here. But let me see and make sure that our slideshow is working well. Boom, there she is. Let me just make sure. Let me double check here. Yep. Okay, cool. So today, Q&A with a therapist. Please help me welcome, familia, our new friend, Tamara Ridge. Hi, Tamara.
Hi.
Welcome to the Tower of Torres.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Where you joining us from?
I am joining you from Lake Arrowhead, California.
Lake Arrowhead, California. Okay, so you're not too far from me, actually.
No,
not too far. So welcome. For people who may not know who you are and what you do you mind just sharing a little bit about who you are and what you do?
So I am a marriage and family therapist. Yes, I've been working in this field for 20 plus years. But I became a therapist because I had lots of childhood trauma and I wanted to figure that out. Right. And so I learned in therapy school that therapy school doesn't teach you how to heal complex trauma. Childhood trauma is what we call it. So it's called developmental trauma or childhood trauma or complex PTSD. And I didn't learn how to do that in school. And so I have been working on my own healing process and honestly been getting downloads from heaven on how to heal myself and to help my clients heal. And so I have a process that it feels like it's my mission to share with the world. And awesome. So I'm now like taking my voice online to YouTube and through online courses and conversations like this to give people hope to know that they can heal. It's really possible.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. And I like that you said downloads from heaven.
Yeah.
That's great. And so what type of people do you work with currently? Are you doing like Zoom?
I do. It's really interesting. So before the pandemic started, I closed my physical office and said, that's it. I'm not doing anymore. That was in December. And then everything closed down in March. And so I just, I felt led. And so now I do.
Wow.
Yeah, I do work that is individual, but I'm focused on making my voice available to a larger group of people now. So I do work at this point in time. I'm working with people who have complex PTSD, trying to heal childhood trauma, but also I work with couples where there's childhood trauma in the relationship because it always shows up.
Yeah.
So, and later this year, I'll be putting out my programs for helping people heal after domestic violence and relationship trauma in adulthood.
And we'll share all your links afterwards because I think you have like a 6-day program, or you have a 6-step program, don't you?
I have 6 steps for healing a trigger, but I have a 48 lesson program that goes over 10 weeks that is inside a closed community that I built myself. That's a social network called Trauma Free Nation.
Awesome.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to all that, but I wanted to start off with the main word here, which is trauma. And I looked at the dictionary definition of trauma, and it just simply said a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. And I'm wondering if there's something more that you could add to that definition, or how you personally may see trauma.
So it's deeply distressing or disturbing is a good starting point. If we think about the trauma that actually impacts people over long term, it's deeply distressing or disturbing. That's usually life-threatening to yourself or to someone else that's close to you, who you know and love, or it's affects our integrity. So like if you think about a child who's constantly in a violent situation, it's their sense of integrity. If they're being called names, it's their sense of like personal, like who they are that's being attacked. So it's trauma is life-threatening or integrity-threatening, development-threatening, that actually is something that not everybody who experiences trauma has lifelong impact of it. So in this case, we'd be talking about people who've had those experiences, then who have trouble moving forward from them.
Yeah, it's interesting you said it that way, because I took some questions on Instagram, and one of the questions was, what is the number? Oh, not that one. What defines trauma versus just having a more average bad experience?
Right. So an average bad experience. So there's 2 kinds of trauma. There's little t trauma and big T trauma. Okay. So little t trauma would be something like an average bad experience that you're having trouble getting past, right? It's your partner lied to you and now you feel trouble trusting. Likely there's a background in that of a big T trauma where lies had a larger impact in your life. So we can have bad experiences, but usually bad experiences, those little T traumas, can get shaken off and we can feel better going, oh, okay, find a way to think about it and feel better. Traumatic experiences leave an impact.
Okay.
Right? They leave an impact that makes it hard to get past.
I remember just recently there was someone who left a comment on one of my videos, and they said that some people, when you experience trauma, for some people they're pushed towards love, and some they're pushed towards anger and hate. In your opinion, or in your experience, what is the determining factor of which way a person ends up? Like,
so anger and hate are 2 variants of something that it goes in a grief process. So grief process usually has denial, shock, bargaining, depression, sadness, anger, not in that order. And then the last one is finding of meaning. But if we look at having I know anytime I have somebody who responds to a traumatic experience and their emotions in the moment seem way bigger than makes sense, I'm like, oh, this person has had some experiences before that feel connected to this in a way that they're having difficulty getting through. So somebody could go through trauma and then immediately be in a loving response. And it's either because they worked through and healed their old stuff, or there's nothing really old connected to it that would move them off of a loving response.
Mm.
So for example, family, I've done a lot of family work. I can have loving responses toward people who've hurt me, but it's because I've done a lot of work.
Mm.
Or I can have compassionate responses toward people who have done something terrible. And my first response is, well, that person is hurting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right?
Hurt people.
Yeah.
Hurt
Yeah.
people.
Hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
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 Or haven't had enough tacos, right?
Yes. Yes. 5 Archies. You get 5 Archies for that.
We
Did
gotta-
you hear that,
Thank you.
Familia?
We gotta add the
The,
taco.
the answer is love and tacos. And
Yes.
The love and tacos.
usually those two are combined together. Do you believe that it's possible that a child can actually already have that as a child, to be able to see love and compassion right from the very beginning, and when they're going through traumatic experiences?
It's an interesting question. I will tell you that from the time I was 7, when the things that were happening to me in my home were happening to me, I went, oh, you're doing this because you're not happy and you're hurting. And it was aggression toward me that wasn't deserved by me. But I went, you're doing this because you're hurting. You're doing this because you're not okay with yourself as a 7-year-old. I think God gave me that too. I think God put me in the family he put me in with the intellect I was given to later at this point in time have gifts to give to the world.
Oh,
That's what I believe.
I believe that too.
Yeah. And it didn't come without a lot of pain. But what happens in that child and what happened in me is the belief about not being good enough or not being lovable ends up being focused toward the self. Right? So I'm going to keep loving the parent. I need the parent to keep loving me. But if I keep making the mistakes that don't make that parent love me, can you hear the thinking in that is wrong? Because a child can't control a parent who's hurting them.
Yeah.
But that's the only way of thinking that works for a child, unless the child wants to think every day, this person is going to annihilate me. I don't know if I'm going to live through the day.
Yeah.
Right? It sounds funny, but it's not.
Right. I
Right?
laughed, but not obviously not out of malice, but because it's so true. Because it's so true, and it's sad that there are a lot of kids that actually are living that, and they are thinking that about themselves. And I asked that question particularly because I remember when I was a kid, my mother brought me to the States when I was only 2, and she came into a new country. She was a single mother. She didn't know the language. She was scared, constantly. We lived in Compton, so that didn't help. It was like the most violent city in LA, and so a lot of times in her frustration, she would lash out at me, yell at me, swear at me, and then sometimes I'd be crying. I'd be like, "You love me?" And just because she was so angry, she'd be like, "No, I don't love you." And even though it hurt, I know that there was some frustration behind it that had absolutely nothing to do with me. And I remember at a very young age understanding that and understanding, okay, she's just hurting.
Right. That's a loving, compassionate response. That's right. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Wow.
All right. All right. Excellent. And okay. So, can you tell me, have you ever had? Obviously, you can't go into what your patients actually talk about or anything like that for confidentiality. But thank you. But has there been a case where you've been working with someone and perhaps it was a series of things that you may have said or worked with them, but that there was just one instant, one little thing that you said that turned it all around for them, that if you would probably if you would have started with that, it would have saved them all that time? Or do you believe that it is always a process?
When we're talking about childhood trauma, I think it's a process. I do have, I think that we have to follow the body. God created these amazing bodies for us. Like if you're making dinner, if you're making tacos and you cut your finger, your body knows what to do with that. As long as you keep it clean, your body knows what to do with that. And you don't have to do anything, no interference, and it will heal. And I think that we in our culture, with all of the focus on the outside and focus on what externally we should be doing instead of listening to our bodies, that gets complicated. But we were created with these beautiful machines that are meant to heal themselves. And that's true of childhood trauma too. So sometimes you will put in a word or something specific that will help somebody turn on a light bulb. But with childhood trauma, there's usually layers and layers and layers of things. So the light bulb, there are usually those moments that happen over and over again. And somebody will come back and say, you know what, Tamara, when you said this, and it's usually the least profound thing that I think I've said. It's true. And then they were like,
all this wisdom was just laid before you, and it was this.
Yeah, right. No, I've learned over the years to not think I make smart words, because when I say something that's just off the cuff, that's the thing. You know?
That's funny. That's interesting. That's really interesting to me. And wow, so many things. There's so many doors that we can open here. But I want to briefly say, if anybody has a question, you can start putting it in the live chat now, and we're going to do it like Sean does it. And if you can add 4 question marks before and then after, this way your question stands out, because some of you are having conversations about with each other, and I just want to make sure it stands out. So if you have any questions for Tamara, please let us know on there. The next word that I wanted to look at was conditioning. And the dictionary says conditioning is the process of training or accustoming a person or an animal to behave in a certain way or to accept certain circumstances. And while a lot of people don't like to think of themselves as machines or computers with like words like program your mind or program your behavior, can you touch on conditioning just a bit?
Yeah, I talk about trauma habits.
Okay.
Right. So we all have trauma habits. If you listen to the complex or the childhood trauma literature, it will talk about fight, flight. You've heard about the fight or flight response.
Right.
There's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And fawn is like trying to please the person and not having your own needs. That's what fawn is. So what happens over time as children, we develop this habit of identifying which behaviors we think will keep us the most safe. And we do those over and over and over and over again in childhood. So they become, our brains are lazy. Those things become we don't even think about them. So for me, when I was a kid, I was always thinking about what I could be doing to make things right. So now in relationship with my fiance, when we first started dating, we were 6 months in or something. And he's like, I think that you ignore me a lot. I don't know if you're trying to ignore me, but whenever I say thank you, you never say you're welcome. And it's a small thing, right? But I was always in my brain constantly like process. That's a habit. Like trying to make sure I'm always okay. That's a habit. So yes, we do have conditioned habits, but they are absolutely, that's why I call them habits, because we can change our habits, but we have to focus on their habits. By the way, I always say you're welcome now.
Excellent practice.
Yeah, thank you.
that surely makes things a lot easier and happier, right?
Yeah, it does.
I want to touch more on this. This is a new word for me, fawn, right? But before we get to it, I want to ask this or answer this question. Or it says, are some thoughts induced in a patient from his childhood because they are inspired by a therapist, him or herself? Any minor in
I think you meant incident.
Oh, incident may be interpreted like a trauma years later? Question mark.
That's interesting. I think that one of the things that therapists have to be really careful about, and by the way, I think that one of the things that makes a good therapist for helping people heal childhood trauma, to really heal it, is a therapist who's had their own complex trauma, who's worked through it. There are an awful lot of therapists who don't do the work. Awful lot of them. And I that's resonating for you. I can see that. So I think that this is a question that can be answered as an extension to what I just said, because therapists can have ridiculous amounts of inappropriate influence on their clients. So a therapist can say, oh, that's a trauma. But the truth is that only I can decide what was traumatic for me. Right?
Wow. Yeah.
Right? We can go through traumatic experiences and be like okay with it. If we are following through the body and we shake it off, literally shake it off, like the body wants to do that, then we can actually get through a traumatic experience with not as much trauma. I think that a question like this will be, I would want to say to One World Music, if a therapist is doing that, then be open to that idea, but you're the ultimate authority. One of the things I say to my clients often is, I'm hearing you say this, and it makes me think I could be wrong though. So if I'm wrong, that's on you to decide. But here's what I'm seeing, and this is what I think about it. So what do you think? What are your thoughts? So a therapist, I can never be, as a therapist, an authority on somebody else's life. I can be an authority on what the path to healing looks like.
Right.
But I can't be an authority. I can't tell a client what's going on for them.
Right, because you're not exactly sure how they're seeing things, how they're feeling about the thing, how their thoughts and their emotions are connecting about a thing, right?
I didn't live their body history. I'm not living in their skin. There's no way for me to know that. Right?
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. And there have been cases where people have maybe even remembered things that really didn't happen, or maybe they because I know that there are people who may have seen something, for example, like in a movie. And if they went through some kind of trauma, they could
like resurfaces.
Yeah, like resurfaces, but they see it as if they're the ones that lived it, versus like they believe that it's their memory. And
I think it's something very careful. It's come up for me in my work that I do with people. And here's the truth: I had a very bad therapist make a suggestion about me having been hurt in a way that I wasn't hurt by a family member who would never have done that. And made the suggestion, and I said, let me think about it. And I spent some time revisiting the locations, feeling in my body, and I came back and said, you were wrong. That's not there. Yeah. But I sometimes have people say, I think I remember something. And my answer is always, it's in your body. If it happened, it's in your body. And it'll come out. Trust your body. Don't second guess. If it's not coming out right now, don't worry about it. There's plenty of other things to worry about.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Some more questions came in, but can we touch a little bit about on this fawn? What that is?
Right. So fight is the intention to win a battle. So if a bear is coming in the room, you're going to have bear for dinner. Okay.
Okay.
Flight is the bear's coming in the room and you're going to find the deepest, darkest corner and hide in it so the bear can never find you.
Okay.
Freeze, you're going to play dead.
Okay.
Fawn, you're going to find out what the bear likes and what the bear's favorite movie is. And you're going to put the movie on for the bear so the bear feels better and is happier. Maybe you're going to even give the bear some ice cream if he likes it.
Well, our mama bear on here, she just likes hugs. So we'll just give her a hug. Mama bear loves hugs.
You hug the bear.
Right. We'll hug the bear and we'll make her laugh.
So the fawn is, I have needs. So every relationship has conflict because no two people have the same needs. Fawn is, I'm going to acquiesce to your needs and take care of your needs and hope that taking care of your needs keeps me safe.
So now there's a word for what Erika does when I'm grouchy and she brings me a taco.
Yeah.
And she calms me. And
that's so true.
We kid, but it's kind of true. It's kind of true. She does that. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you for explaining that. I've never heard. In fact, freeze was one of the ones that I actually recently
on the last one.
Heard of. I knew what it was, but I didn't know that there was a word for it like freeze. So I knew fight or flight, because I think I described it as the need to fight or flight or fly, but you do neither. And she's like, yeah, it's freeze. Okay, yeah, it makes sense.
Well, and there's another stage that you've never heard of because I came up with it.
Okay.
Ooh.
It's called and it's because I've lived childhood trauma and I've looked for healing in my own body. It's called the ready for fight or flight stage. So you're not in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn yet, but you're prepared for it. So there's a researcher in Scotland who's doing some work around this in around psychotherapy when he's got therapy clients, and he asked them to talk about trauma memories and what happens. The way I found it is I was doing meditation and relaxation to try to calm my body and keep it calm. And I'd notice, like, laying down in my bed, I'd get myself really, really relaxed and then slowly pull my shoulders and neck off the bed and make my chin tense. And so fight or flight, the ready for fight or flight response resides right here. The shoulders, neck, upper back, and face. And it's what we do to get ready in case something happens, but it's before we're triggered. And so what I've seen in my own work and in the work that I'm doing with clients is that if we stay focused on keeping that calm, and for me, there's a there's a video on my YouTube channel that demonstrates that. I call it the psoas release position. If we every day get in the practice of going, okay, where's the tension in my body? Am I in fight or flight? Am I ready for fight or flight? It actually prevents us from getting into the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn state because we're more connected and more in control of our body.
That makes a lot of sense.
Complete sense. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah,
Thank you.
That's new and definitely helpful. Incredibly helpful. Brenda D asks, what is the best way to get through childhood trauma? For example, sexual abuse, parents arguing constantly, being locked in a room, where a person is triggered now as a Christian.
And so is she asking about the best way to get through childhood trauma when we're Christian?
Yes.
I will tell you that I have a very strong bias about this, and it is that if we are prayerful people and we ask for God's help in healing, healing goes faster, without a doubt. Without a doubt. When I'm trying to work through something, or when I'm having somebody else, when I'm helping them work through something, and they ask this question, I always say, pray. Ask God to show you what you need to see in your next step in healing. And absolutely it helps. Absolutely. God, I think, again, if we have been created to heal, honestly, look, people in the general community say that complex trauma can't be healed. And I'm going to just go deep right now.
Okay.
So here's the thing. If Jesus actually died on the cross for us to take on all of it and make it all healable, did he do that for everyone except the people who have childhood trauma? He didn't. Yeah, right? I got goosebumps. I have goosebumps. So first, pray about it. But secondly, you've got to find a structured. So there's not a lot of movement in the mental health community to help people with childhood trauma because therapists need to have done their own work. And there's not a lot of people, there's Peter Levine and there's Bessel van der Kolk who've done research and written books, but they're not saying here's the step-by-step process to help you get through your own trauma. So what is the best way to get through your trauma? Learn a system, learn how to listen to your body, understand how to erase triggers. Because if you think about it, any childhood experience that leads to a repeated putting us in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn state, it starts as a seed. And that seed is whatever the event or the repeated event is in childhood. Then the reason that childhood trauma is so hard to heal is it happens in the context of everyday living, right? So mom's frustrated, you're living in Compton, she gets stressed out, And then she says things that are hurtful. Well, guess what? People around you are going to get stressed out all the time. So if that was a trauma, that means that you have a seed that says a stressed out person will hurt me. Right?
Right.
Or if I didn't make a bed right, I have a seed that says if a bed or a household chore isn't done right, then somebody's going to hurt me. We can apply it to 1,000 things.
Wow.
And it is applied to 1,000 things when it comes from childhood trauma. So if we think about that seed, then everything that came along after the seed is a layering of emotion that puts energy in the body that makes that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response bigger when a reminder shows up. So I know. So what we have to do is we have to go to, and you don't need therapy for this. The system I have works, but you go to the seed, identify what it is, heal the seed, and then the body doesn't need to hold on to all of that emotional energy anymore that keeps that seed in place. In fact, the body will say, oh, the trigger's healed. We don't need all this energy. The energy dissipates from the body.
Wow.
You just reminded me of like an exercise that I did when I was younger, where I guess you'd call it meditation. I didn't know it was meditation at the time, but I would imagine a round table, and my 4 bodies would come to the table. So my physical, my mental, emotional, and spiritual would come to the table. And they would have a discussion, and it says, okay, so physical, what's going on? And it's like, well, I can't sleep because the mind keeps thinking, what if this, what if that? So I can't get any rest because the mind doesn't rest. And the mind goes, well, I can't get any rest because emotions over there feeling everything, just crying about everything, worried about everything. And so like, I can't sleep. And then spiritual was like, well, look, I feel no connection to anything whatsoever because you guys just keep arguing and fighting. So then there's this fourth perspective, which is, I guess, me, whatever's higher or more higher than any of that, observational, the observer, I guess. And it says, okay, well, can the body just promise to go to sleep a little bit earlier? And mind, can you promise to just distract yourself by maybe not watching the news, maybe not doing this activity, and just calming yourself up a little bit? Emotions, can we maybe, before jumping the gun and becoming angry at this event, can you just maybe take a step back and relax a little bit, and then allow the spirit, so kind of compromising my four parts, so that little by little the tension would start to calm and dissolve and be a little bit more, I don't know, have a little bit more control over a situation versus everybody just coming out and making a blend.
You know what I like about that is that when we've had childhood trauma, we have a lot of internal noise. There's a lot of internal noise, and to shift it, you have to say, okay, where can I start? And so when you bring those 4 parts to the table, you're like, okay, where can each of my parts start? That's beautiful. It's really lovely.
Yeah.
You said we're sort of reminding me of that. And so before we get to this question, I wanted to bring up this next word, which is trigger. It says an event or circumstance that is the cause of a particular action, process, or situation. And I know from what you said, it sounds like trigger also is sort of like I guess trigger would be, well, obviously the trigger, and like if you were imagine a weapon, so the trigger would be the trigger, and the bullet would probably be like the pattern that it gets activated once you.
So I think we have to be careful about associating triggers with weapons.
Yeah, okay.
I think we do. Because people who have had trauma may have had some of that, and so we have to be careful about it.
All right,
so no, don't be sorry. It's okay. I think one of the things that I've been fortunate enough to experience is lots of education about sensitivities that people who have childhood trauma bring to the table about these conversations. And I don't want anybody in your audience to go and kind of lose it, right? So, but I think you're welcome. I think a trigger is the thing that triggers a series of events. So originally, make a mistake. So I learned how to cook as a child, but I was not allowed to make mistakes when I was cooking. So if I was found to be making a mistake, I messed up something on the recipe, or I didn't do something right, I had reason to be afraid. Okay. So when I cook, doesn't happen anymore. But when I cook, if a mistake happens, that triggers a series of events, right? So for me in the kitchen, there's a little bit of dissociation where I will be cooking, but not cleaning up after myself because I'm a little bit too fight or flight going on. Right? So the trigger, think of the trigger as like dominoes that will fall down. When you push the first one, that's the trigger. Right? So in this case, some sort of an event and a memory of something happening is enough to be a trigger too. You can get triggered by remembering something just as much as something happening outside of you. So that triggering event triggers a cascade of other things happening inside the trauma brain. That's how we should think of trigger, like it's a, like a tripwire. Maybe we should change it. Let's do that. Let's change it from trigger to tripwire.
Okay, tripwire. Yeah. That's the new. All right, excellent. I like that.
We'll just change it. You have enough followers. Let's just change it right now.
Yeah, we can. All right, from now on, it's called the tripwire.
That's right.
Okay. Key says, my childhood trauma, sexual abuse, domestic violence, etc. I ended up developing dissociative identity disorder, and as a Christian, it's hard not to feel like in denial. How can I move forward?
So it's very interesting because I'm developing. So I have dissociative experiences from when I was really very young and didn't even realize it. And that's an interesting way of, right? We don't realize some of the things we do as trauma survivors. And when he says, as a Christian, Key, I don't know. So as a Christian, it's hard not to feel like in denial. So one of the things that it's really important to understand, and this is true in church as well, is that sometimes we're asked to not hear what's happening in our own body. We're sometimes asked that, not to hear, to put value on what's being said or what the instructions are or the rules about what we're supposed to do. And in my experience, so I am not continuing in the religious tradition that I was raised in. I left that when I was 43 intentionally. But one of the things that it did was it caused me, and I think this is true of anyone who's had childhood trauma, especially those kinds of abuse, is we take the rules and we adhere to them so rigidly that they become traumas themselves. They keep us from God. They keep us from being able to make a good connection with other people because we're thinking more about not breaking rules than we are thinking about how do I move forward in the most loving way? What is the best thing for me in my body? And how do I share that with another person in a way that helps them meet their needs too? So I think that one of the things that you can do when you're working through the childhood trauma, Key, is looking at how hard the rules have to be followed. Because sometimes, I know for myself, I followed the rules so freaking hard that I painted myself into a box that was harmful. And I think that's easy to do that and then shut down feelings and being in denial because we're so scared all the time.
Wow, that was incredibly insightful. Incredibly insightful. Sorry, I almost made you spit your water out. Wow, that was incredibly insightful. Jackie wants to know, can childhood abuse lead to an inability to feel recognized emotions?
Yes, and there's a very good reason for that.
Okay.
So if you think about in childhood, I've already alluded to this idea that if I have a parent who's being non-nurturing, neglectful, or abusive, it's too much for a child's psyche to stay in contact with what that could lead to on an everyday basis. So a child has to shut down their feelings and focus on how can I please, what do I need to do to be cute enough or funny enough or smart enough or compliant enough to please this other person so they don't hurt me. So the focus becomes exterior instead of on their own feelings. And when that happens, that's a survival strategy, right? A child who's receiving normal development and is getting mirrored well enough by a parent who's nurturing, like you've seen it. You've seen like a 2-year-old running and they fall down. And before they start crying, they look at their parent to see if they should cry, right?
Yeah.
And the parent says, oh, you're okay. And if the parent says, you're okay, the kid gets up and runs away. If the parent says, oh my God, then the kid goes, ah! Right?
Yeah.
So that parent is teaching the child how to recognize and regulate emotions. In an abusive situation, the child is having emotions and experiences in their body, and the parent is saying, or whoever it is that's causing the abuse is saying, well, what I'm doing is okay. There's no problem here. So that gives a message to the child, oh, my feelings aren't reliable. I can't trust my own body.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so
Wow.
then feelings, and the other thing too is that feelings that we don't feel or express build up and get bigger and bigger over time. That's why we have rebellious kids. That's why we have angry kids. That's why we have kids who hurt themselves, because they're carrying all of this emotion like a pressure cooker in the body, but they're not allowed to express it or feel it. So can child abuse lead to inability to feel and recognize emotions? Absolutely. And I think, Jackie, the next question, logical, that comes after that is, so if that's the case, what do I do about it?
Mm-hmm.
You got to first start connecting with your body. And this may sound very strange, but many survivors of childhood abuse who then maybe develop relationships where feelings aren't appropriate or safe, you have to start tuning into your body. So at the most basic level, think of potty training. Most people who've had childhood abuse who aren't into feeling their bodies yet never pee. They hold it all freaking day. So pay attention. When are you hungry? When do you need to pee? How often are you tired? And start meeting those needs, and other feelings will start coming up.
That's interesting. It's really interesting. I have Linda who says, how can you know if you really healed? I didn't seek help because I had internalized that no one helps me, so I helped myself. I accept and even understand now. Is it healed?
So how you know that you're really healed is there are several indicators. One is, can you be in silence in your body? Are you at peace when things happen around you that maybe have created a rise in you before? So you want to look for, do I have any like large, inappropriate, out of proportion responses that don't make sense given the here and now context, right? So am I getting mad, overly mad, or shutting down, or something that is like anybody else looking at that would go, wow, okay, that's a big response, right? Is any of that happening? Linda, when I read your question, I also think that if you think that no one helps you, so you helped yourself, and you accept and understand that, it may be healed, but you might be. One of the complications of childhood trauma is, one of the trauma behaviors is exaggerated independence.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be that you've done a lot of healing. So, I've done a lot of healing, but I still relax my body every day because my body has a habit of getting into that ready for fight or flight state. So am I fully 100% healed? No, I think I'm like really far down the road. But do I still have to do things to soothe and comfort baby Tammy who got hurt? Yep, I sure do. So is it healed? I think it's always a process. Am I healed maybe more than a lot of people who haven't ever looked at their traumas? Probably. But it is really, can you function across a very wide variety of situations and do well in those situations. If you can, cool.
What does exaggerated independence look like?
I don't need to talk to anybody about this. It's my problem. I can fix it myself. People who have exaggerated independence won't rely on anyone else. Don't ask for help. Often will be helpers, but not have any needs that they will put out. So one of the things is, in your friend group, are you only a giver, or do you ever receive? That's exaggerated independence.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Somebody mentioned, Kobe wanted to know wants to know about inner healing being an essential part of the healing process.
I don't know if there's any other kind of healing.
Yeah.
I don't. I think that whatever happens externally, what people see me do, it's interesting because as I started to do and start learning about creating YouTube and started learning about putting yourself out there with a message, right? They say, get ready because stuff's going to happen. Well, I think if there's something I can't handle, then I need to heal it. If somebody sees me doing a behavior that doesn't fit, and the person who sees me the most doing behaviors that don't work is the guy I'm going to marry. Because he sees the face. Like when he's like, I will get triggered and it hasn't happened for a while, but one of the most entertaining ones was he asked me 3 questions in a row. Did you wash your hands? Did you do this? Did you do this? And I told myself, don't say anything. And I turned around and looked at him and he's like, you look like you were going to kill me. And then he goes, I'm just going to go sit down over here.
Yeah. If you want to live, yeah.
and then 5 minutes later, he's like, so how are we? Are you triggered? Right. And so that's an external, right? But all of that comes from something inside. All of it does.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a question?
No, I'm looking at the questions.
She's looking at the questions.
There's just so many, so I'm trying.
That's great. Let's see.
Good questions.
If you pick one up, let me know. I'm
going back.
Can you touch a little bit on, for example, what I had mentioned? Oh, Jackie says thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Jackie.
Can you touch a little bit on I don't know if it would be too much, but we talk about things that happen external and then how they affect us. And there are layers. So how it affects me emotionally, how it affects me mentally, and how it affects me on a physical level. So that feeling you talk about it being just, physical, and then the thoughts that come along with that and the emotions that come with that. Is it worth splitting yourself into those layers to heal, or is that too much?
That's very insightful, Leonardo. It's real. You deserve a taco.
Yes, 2 tacos today.
I gave you 4 right before this. 2
more. It's okay.
I'll give you 2 more. But I made sure to feed him before this because he starts getting hungry eyes. And then he starts doing a lot of this and this. I'm like, okay, he's ready for a taco.
Time for a taco. Yeah. So here's the thing. In my system, you have to really understand. So a trigger happens. So an event outside of you happens that creates fear or starts that cascade, right? What did we decide we're going to call it? The tripwire, right? And the first thing that happens that's usually quite under the radar, that happens really fast, is a thought about it. It's the belief that was laid down at the time that original traumatic event happened.
Okay.
And that belief leads to a set of feelings. And the feelings are usually so intolerable. The feelings are so intolerable that we have to, especially as children, think about it as a child. We have this huge terror in our body, and the feeling is so intolerable that I have to do something so I don't feel fear. And that is try to control the situation that I can't control. Right? So we carry that into adulthood. Tripwire, thought that flashes through, emotion that starts to, if you've seen any of those time elapsed pictures of a little plant starting to grow, and it starts to, and then you have this big plant. So the minute the soil starts to move of the emotion, we know it because it's familiar. My stuff is my stuff. It's always been my stuff. So it starts to move, and I'm like, oh no, I better do something. And so then the action is happening. Many times the space between the tripwire and the action is so fast that people don't even know why they're doing the thing that they're doing. Mm-hmm. And then they hate it. And then they add on that shame and guilt and fear and feeling terrible about themselves when it's not them, it's the trauma. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. So slowing that down. In fact, therapists often will do reframe.
Yeah.
Right? Or if somebody who loves you will say, oh, don't think that way, think this way. Yeah. None of that works, because what we need to do is catch that thought that goes flying by and take it out and look at it and go, okay, what's the truth? This was true at some point in my life. Uh-huh. And that's why I'm so scared. But what's real right now? And then replace it. And that's a process. That's the 6-step process. That's 7 steps if we put taco in at number 3. But that process, once you've healed the trigger, you can it actually heals, and we release the energy from the body. Mm-hmm. But the answer to your question is, that's the foundation. We have to separate those parts, because if we don't, then we're just, the more times that cycle goes through, from tripwire to thought to emotions to action to guilt and shame and fear, the more times that's happened, the faster it goes. Mm-hmm. So we have to slow it down.
Yeah, the pattern just becomes a lot stronger, and then it just continues faster and faster and faster. Wow.
And it adds layer of emotional energy on top of that seed. So now we have this huge ball of wax that nobody likes.
Yeah, that's great. It reminds me of like when you go to the doctor, or you're in a hospital, and the doctor says something like, they reacted to the medication. If you reacted, it's that means it's not a good thing, right? You reacted to the medication, so they keep you in for observation. And if they say you responded to the medication, that means that your body accepted it. It was welcome, right? It's working. And as you were saying all that, I totally pictured sorry again for like a mousetrap, right? Where there's a tripwire, and like it just happens like all in an instant.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And being the filmmaker and having tweaking with editing, I went into my internal editing software and I slowed it down, just slowed the whole process down of the thing coming in.
Yeah.
And we could do that in our minds, can't we? Is that
we can? It's easier to do when there's less internal noise. So the more layers of childhood trauma that we have, the harder it is to slow that down, because we have these extra pieces of, I haven't been able to protect myself in the past. And this isn't a conscious thought, but I haven't been able to protect myself in the past. So there must be something wrong with me. So when we start to slow something down and we don't get it right the first time, then we start calling ourselves all of the names that we were either called or someone we called ourselves, which makes us stop. Or I have a Facebook group called I Am a Gift. And in that we do challenges through I have a gratitude and inner wisdom journal for trauma survivors. And I was working through the first exercise with in the May group, and the feedback was, Tamara, nothing against you, but telling me to write a letter to my inner child, that's stupid. And I'm like, well, you're right, it is stupid. If it's your job to keep yourself safe 100% of the time, and putting the wall down to say, I am loved and I am beautiful and I am safe and I am worthy. If I do that, then I'm not watching for danger anymore.
Ooh. Oh,
Right?
yeah.
And the more layers of that exist, the harder it is to slow it down because we have things going in. When I first started the gratitude practice, I did it for, I don't know, a few weeks. And then I'm like, I hate this. I'm not doing this anymore. And then I took a step back and went, wait a minute. That's my PTSD wanting me to keep watching for danger instead of being grateful for all of the amazing things that are going in my life.
It's what I heard you say was that we're always trying to add another layer of meaning to things. Is that right? Like,
and we're either trying to do it as people who are able to receive gratitude and look for the joyful things in our life, or we're doing it because we've learned so many habits around trying to keep ourselves safe when we've been hurt that it feels impossible to do that. So then the meaning is, so it's either I can because I've had healthy development and people who've mirrored emotions and taught me to listen to my body and taught me to look at events in an optimistic way, or my childhood trauma has taught me that nothing is safe and nobody is safe. And so the kind of meaning we place on it has a lot to do with the habits that got developed while we were either secure and nurtured and safe or not.
Wow.
if you could mention 3 tips that we could do to begin the process of reframing like a negative thought or a negative tripwire, what would those 3 tips be? Or you can add more to it if 3 is not enough.
Of reframing. So I don't like the word reframing.
Okay.
Because we don't want to reframe it. We want to erase it. We want to eliminate the tripwire.
Okay.
So there are actually 6 steps to doing that. Yeah, perfect question. There are 6 steps. Yeah. So the first is to recognize the out of proportion response. So it's whether you get angry and have a big response, or whether you withdraw and don't say you're welcome. Whatever it is that doesn't fit the context, you look at that. That's the first step. And then you say, what? So part of step 1 is, what happened right before that? And what did I say to myself about it? Right?
Yeah.
The second is breathe. Now, not every kind of breathing is the right kind of breathing. We can breathe in a way that creates more anxiety. We want to breathe in a way that actually activates the vagus nerve in the body, because when the vagus nerve is activated in the body, it relaxes the body and takes the brain out of fight or flight. Then we can use our full IQ toward deactivating that tripwire. Without it, we don't have it. We're just running from a bear. Okay? Yeah. And then the third step is to say, okay, how does this out of proportion response that I'm having right now make sense? So I start to pay attention. We have something, all of us have something that I call body history. If you Google it, you'll only find it with my name, because nobody else talks about body history. But it's like this container of emotional energy that also has the beliefs in it, but it's mostly emotional energy that's in our body, right? We can't unzip the body and see all of this emotional energy,
Right.
But it's there, right? So step 3 is to look at the container of emotional energy. You don't have to tell the story. You just have to say, how is this familiar? How does this feel? What is this connected to that's familiar in this moment? And then once you find that thing, you don't have to tell the story. The next step is, what percentage of this out of proportion response, the emotion connected to it, is old? Right? And when we look at that, what percentage of it is old? It's usually, if it's connected to a tripwire, 60 to 100% old most of the time.
Wow.
If people are in relationships that have repeated those same patterns and they're not safe, then it's going to be less old. Because it'll be present. There'll be things right now that are reinforcing it. But that's step 4. What percentage of this is old? So when my fiance asked me 3 questions and I turned around and I was ready to kill him. I don't think I was ready to kill him, but I just have one of those faces that you can tell everything I'm thinking from my expression. So, so if I decide, oh, that's 100% old, then the next question is, what's real right now? You ask yourself that question. What's real right now? And make a list. Write out a list. Because that list of things that are real right now won't feel like the truth, because what feels like the truth is what's in the body history. Right? Then step number 6. Sorry, I left the tacos out. But
It's okay.
Step number 6 is the next time that tripwire shows up, repeat step number 1, which is what just happened. Breathe. And step number 5, get that list and read it out loud. Okay. I had a client who was an Afghanistan active combat veteran, was going to the VA, was not getting the help he needed, was using substances to help him deal with his anxiety. Night terrors, it was horrific. I taught him these steps. He's using the steps, they're effectively helping him. And then he comes back one day and says, Tamara, the steps aren't working. I said, are you breathing? Oh, that's the thing I forgot. I'm not breathing. Right? So then he did step 1, 2, and 5 every time a trigger came back. And I haven't seen him since.
Wonderful.
I've seen him a few times since, but he's out there doing his own work, healing himself.
Breathing.
Breathing, living life, experiencing relationship in a positive way.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. I hope that helps
download. That's what God gave me. Those 6 steps.
That's wonderful. I hope that the information on this show are helping someone out there. If you can let us know if all of this is helpful, you can either hit the like button or let us know in the live chat that it's all helpful. I'm still blown away by those 6 steps. We forgot tacos in there, but repeat 1, 2, have a taco, and then 5 as you're reading the list.
That's right. You got it. The taco goes between 2 and 3. That's right.
That's wonderful. If anybody tries this, can you please follow up with us in the comments and let us know if you know how this all works out for you? I'm really curious to know. This is Carrie. This is Mama Bear.
Hi, Mama Bear.
We call Mama Bear. She says, I positively work on forgiving those who sexually abused, assaulted, and raped me, but I struggle hugely with forgiving my mom because she sat and watched and allowed the assault to happen.
Okay. First of all, Carrie, I'm sorry. That's not okay. And secondly, what I will say is the reason you're having trouble forgiving your mom is because there are still some feelings and needs that were left unmet. So the reality is healing takes 2 parts. Like there are more parts than that. In my programs, there are several pieces to help people understand. The 6 steps are the center of the hub of about 9 other pieces that help us heal. But healing from trauma requires 2 parts. One is heal that tripwire. And the second is to do the grief work connected to the reason the trigger happened in the first place. So you working on forgiving and releasing the energy in the body that it's connected around the triggers of being sexually abused, assaulted, raped. That's one piece. Healing yourself from that part is one piece. The second, we cannot forgive until we've adequately grieved. Mom was supposed to do her job and she didn't. And it's rightful to have anger. And if we're Christian, sometimes it's hard to let ourselves feel anger. But if something really happened, it's okay to feel angry in your own behalf. It's not okay to do things in anger that hurt other people, but it's absolutely okay to feel and express anger. There's a book by Dr. John Sarno, Sarno, called The Body-Mind Prescription. And he talks about holding energy in the body that is unresolved emotion. And when I was still in the fundamental church that I was in when I grew up, I had terrible pain in my thighs, awful pain in my thighs. And I read Dr. Sarno's book and realized that I had rage that I was carrying in my quads. Rage. As soon as I realized it and I spoke it, the pain in my body, like fibromyalgia kind of stuff, started releasing. So I want you to give yourself permission to be angry with your mom. Give yourself permission to wish for a different mom. Give yourself permission to be sad about the things that she did to you. And once you've gone through all of the emotions that are connected with having a mom like her, and there's no more residual energy in your body and your body history around the things she did or didn't do, then you'll be able to forgive because you'll be at peace. But it takes more than one cycle through usually.
Yeah,
It does.
that's all very interesting. I have a book called The Anatomy of Spirit, and it talks a little bit about kind of what you just said. When we're, for example, when we feel like we can't speak up for ourselves, we feel a tension in our throat. When we feel insecure about, finances, we feel pain in our lower stomach, and that later on can develop into other diseases, like different types of cancers and stuff like that. From holding
Carolyn
all that.
Mees? Carolyn Mees?
I think so. Yeah. Yes, it is.
Carolyn Mees. Yeah.
Yeah, Anatomy of Spirit. Carolyn Mees. Yeah. Yeah. It's a wonderful book.
Yeah, it is.
Well, okay. So all that was excellent advice. What would you say to someone who maybe has a parent or someone who hurt them, who's no longer in their lives? Maybe they moved on. Maybe they're passed away. Some people have this idea that you need to confront the person, or you need to address the person in person and say, "I forgive you," or just that. And sometimes when that person passes away, you feel like you've been robbed from being able to fully grieve. Is there some kind of?
It's an interesting question. I think that process is best done independent from the person who's been hurtful. Carrie, you're very welcome. I'm glad it helped. I think that one of the things that we expect when we want to do one of those confrontations with a person is we expect that they're going to respond in the way we hope they respond instead of in the way that fits who they are.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to recognize that when we want to do that and we decide we're going to go and confront someone, it's actually a piece of grief that we still need to do. Because almost never. So I'll tell you, I went to my parents when I was 43, and I went to my mom and said, "Hey mom, my parents are still living. Hey mom, those things that gave us trouble," which was like a very compassionate, like kind of in denial way of me to say that. When I was a kid, when dad wasn't home, nobody ever came to see if I was okay afterward. And she said, "Oh no, really?" And I'm like, "No." And she was like, "I'm so sorry." And then I went to my dad and I said, "Hey dad, did you know that when you used to go to work, mom used to beat me up?" He's like, "What?" And I said, "Yeah." He's like, "I'm so sorry." And I'm like, "Thank you." He's like, "Why didn't you tell me?" I don't know, an 8-year-old. "Hi dad, mom, maybe it doesn't happen." Yeah. So he held me and I sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And I thought, oh, it's going to be so much better. Same people. Right? It was a moment in time. Did it heal things? Did it change the dynamic? Nope. So I think we have to really rely on, and here's the thing, when I decided to go no contact, it was after inspiration from God, where he said to me, "Leave them to me."
Ooh. Oh, I got chills. Wow.
So I focus on my work and leave them to him.
And in what way has that presented itself?
What do you mean?
Like how is he, like you left it to him? Has there been anything to show for that message?
No, I'm fully leaving that in his hands. which means I'm focusing on my own work and this work and my life and healing myself. I think many times that children, people, adults who survived childhood trauma spend a lot of time trying to fix a wound in a relationship instead of working on healing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't do both.
Liza says, my abuser passed away. I think I've healed, but I still act in ways that bring me backwards.
So it's interesting when you say you think you've healed. I think we heal in parts. I think we heal in stages and in pieces. And so maybe you have healed. But when you act in those ways that bring you backwards, stop and listen to your body and say, okay, what piece of my pain is still bringing these behaviors out in me? Because it will show you another way that healing is an opportunity sitting in front of you.
Wow. I'm learning so much. Oh, wow. That's wonderful. It's great to have you on here to have this conversation.
Thank you. It's fun.
All right. Well, if it's okay with you, we'll take a couple more questions and then,
Sure.
but before we take some more questions.
Go ahead. There was one from David. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We'll take it right after. But can you tell me about your journal? You just pointed it out.
This is Gratitude and Inner Wisdom Journal for Trauma Survivors. It's on Amazon, and I priced it as cheaply as I could because I want it to be available. So what happened is I noted that I had taken the people out of my life who were not positive, left them to God, and then in my relationship, things started happening so positively, and I had all of this room for blessing in my life and happiness and joy. And yet I was still not saying you're welcome because I was so stuck in my head, right? So I said, wait a minute, how do I get myself out of this triggered brain all the time? And I meditated and prayed on it. And the answer for me was gratitude. So I started developing this inner wisdom gratitude journal. And what it is we have, so the reason that trauma becomes trauma, it's because as a child, when something's happening to me, somebody or something is overriding my body and my child wisdom. If we can reconnect, if I as a child, as a trauma survivor, can reconnect to the wisdom I've always had. For example, somebody's hurting me and that's not okay. Connect to that wisdom, right? Somebody's hurting me and it's about them. It isn't about me. That's wisdom, right? So this journal starts with a journey from writing a letter to your wise inner child, reconnecting with that wise inner child. And then I go through all of the stages of development. So one of the things that happens for survivors of childhood trauma is that we miss big chunks of development. So social development becomes hard. Keeping the environment clean becomes hard. People have trouble managing money. Like there are all of these developmental pieces that if you were in a nurturing home, you should have received. But because you didn't, there's the developmental piece. It's backwards on the screen. There's a developmental piece we should have achieved. And then there's something that's missing. So we don't have good friendships. We don't know how to make boundaries. We don't know how to say no because we're afraid to hurt feelings. All of that stuff happens. Right?
Check.
And the thing that's holding that gap open is the tripwires.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you heal the trigger, you heal the tripwires, and then you can close the gap. But what's missing for adult survivors of childhood trauma is the awareness of where their developmental gaps are because of the habits that we're not even aware of. So this journal goes through, it's really a workbook, goes through all of the areas of development that usually get left behind for trauma survivors. And it's an exploration really to help people see it. Once you see where the gap is, then you can go, oh, wait, what's keeping me from doing what I need to do? So it covers food. It covers the way we treat our environment, covers how we nurture our body. It covers how we deal with emotions. It covers with how we communicate in relationships. It covers how we receive love. Yeah. And so it really is about finding beliefs that we belong. You know, trauma survivors can feel alone in crowded rooms. And alone in a crowded room where everyone in the room is saying, "Oh, we love you so much," still feel alone, right? That gap is held open by tripwires, as we're calling them today.
Wow.
So that's what this is. This is like a discovery to help you see the spaces that for you individually need to be closed, because you can heal a trigger that's holding that gap open.
I like the title of it. It's beautiful. Gratitude. I've already added the link in the description, by the way. So if anybody wants to get that, the link is in the description below, or you can get it from her on her page as well. It just leads to the Amazon page, so they can buy it from you.
It's on Amazon.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. What was the question?
David Wellman had asked, so can you, I'm thinking meant to put you, can you suggest a strategy or resource for approaching our own children to discuss our own behavior?
To discuss our own behavior.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Thank you for that question. I think that one of the things that is the most healing for a child is for a parent to say, "I'm really sorry." This is true in relationship as well. So this year I'm going to be also rolling out how to heal complex PTSD in context of relationship. But the most healing thing, could you imagine if your mom had said to you after she got all stressed out and said she didn't love you, if she had come back and held you and kissed you on the forehead and said, "I'm sorry. Mom gets stressed out sometimes. And when she does, she says really mean things. And that's not okay. I'm going to work on it. That's my fault." Right?
Yeah.
It would have done something. Or if my mom had said, "I don't hate you because you're thin. I'm frustrated with myself and I should have never said those words to you. I'm sorry." Right? That's what we should be doing as parents. I'm sorry. I make mistakes. I'm not perfect. I'm trying to grow. I'm trying to heal too. That's what our kids need to hear if we've been struggling with trauma. That's what, whenever I have a response, and this is true in relationship too, whenever I have a response that doesn't fit and isn't about my partner, but it looks like I think it's about my partner because of what my face did. It's super important for me to go, "Whoops, sorry, trauma brain. That was me. Sorry, that was not about you at all." That's what heals. Responsibility. Right. One of the things that people complain about as victims, as childhood abuse survivors, is people saying, you have the responsibility for healing yourself. Okay, let's be careful about the way we say that. But the most healing thing I can do as a trauma survivor is take responsibility for my inappropriate, out of proportion behaviors, even whether it came from trauma or something else. That's the most important thing that I can do.
Yeah, it sounds, well, in the way that you described how your tripwires affected, like with your fiance, those tripwires can create tripwires within that person as well. Right?
Yes, they can.
We say something and then they don't understand that it's just you, but they take it personal, and then that creates a tripwire, so that every time you lash out, now they're going to react a specific way to you as well.
Yeah, and one of the things that I tell couples when I'm working with couples around this is that healthy relationships are built with both people taking responsibility for their own stuff. So that I'm not putting it on you and you're not putting it on me, and that I can give you grace if I see you having an out of proportion response that I know is not about me. Let it be that. Respond compassionately. Right?
Wow. That's great. Bethel House of God says, "My dad abused me physically when I was a child. He is now with God, and I'm still struggling with forgiveness. How can I move on with my life? Please help me."
So the way that you do that is by one trigger at a time, healing. So you really can't, it's really hard to, my fiance, I break a rule every time I stay in bed and read spiritual literature, because there was a rule when I was a kid that says that you're not allowed to stay in bed if there's work to be done. And so one morning I'm in bed reading spiritual literature, and he brings me this lovely warm glass of lemon water, hands me the water silently, turns around and walks out. I start crying and immediately in my head say to myself, I don't deserve this, right? A tripwire. It's what happened. And then I had to go, wait a minute. Went through all of the steps, got myself back together. It took me about an hour to do that. Heal the trigger. Second, grieve the loss. So that's what you have to do. So the first thing out of my mouth, once I've got myself back together again, was to say to him, and having somebody who has compassionate ears to hear is really helpful. I am really angry that my mother treated me in a way that makes me afraid when you do something loving.
That's so honest.
Yeah, it's the real stuff.
Yeah.
So when you say your father's with God, you're still struggling with forgiveness. First, you have to acknowledge what's happening in your body for you. We cannot. So look at, our childhood trauma encouraged us to ignore what was happening to us and still behave in ways that everybody else wanted us to behave. If I'm expected now, once my parent has passed, to just forgive because that's the thing to do, it's the same pattern. So how about let's acknowledge what's going on and give it the full weight of the impact it had and express the feelings and grieve. And then you can come to a place where you forgive. But it can't be done out of order.
I hope that helps. Give 1 second. I have a 6-year-old who has a question.
Are you done yet?
Not yet. Almost, okay?
That's the best question all night.
Are you done yet? Yeah, almost. Wow, this is all so great. I think I saw somebody's asked if you would be willing to come back.
I would absolutely be willing to come back. I'd love to. And the other thing to know too is that I am putting out YouTube videos 3 times a week. And when somebody answers a question on YouTube, I answer those questions with a video. Oh,
great. So there you are. If you are interested in having a question, you could ask questions just like you do when you request a reaction on my channel. You just leave it on her video in the comment section, and then she'll more likely answer it in a video. Another video. And I've already linked your channel on the description down below. So if anybody's interested in checking out the free content that she has on her channel, it's great. She has the steps also on some videos, and along with other stuff that she talks about. You had one video that I particularly found really interesting, because a lot of times when we're going through like anxiety, the first thing that a therapist would say is breathe. You just have to breathe. And you have a video that says that breathing can sometimes lead to intensify the anxiety or the tripwires. Is that right? We'll probably let everyone go find that video and find out, so we won't share it on here. But is there anything else that you want to touch on, or anything you want to leave us with before we head out?
I just healing is possible, and it's the best way to do it is have a system that works, and I do. And my program, I've wanting to, especially during this pandemic, it's $249 for the full 6 months of access, and then $9 a month after that. So it's not expensive. And I'm in there every Wednesday morning answering questions like this to help people really use the stuff that they're learning in the course. So it's my mission to get this in as many hands as possible, because I believe that healing is our birthright. God intends us to heal. And so that's my contribution to this work. It's absolutely possible, and believe that. and I'm here to help. And I think it's a low entry point. So
Thank you so much. Actually, if it's okay with you, we'll answer one more because it caught my attention. Is that okay?
sure. Absolutely.
This is from Eric Davis. It says, why can I still not tell my parents that I love them, even though I've been on my own since 17?
Are you mad at them? Well, so if your parents have done things that have caused you tremendous pain, then it's hard. It's really hard to think about somebody who's hurt us in a loving way if we haven't acknowledged our own feelings. So a child who has to be compliant to keep themselves safe, the rule is do it the way the parents want. If your parents want you to say that you love them, or you feel disappointed in yourself because you love them, compare that to your own experience of how much have you acknowledged your own feelings about what happened. It's impossible to have unresolved, unacknowledged feelings about our own traumas and then forgive or say I love you or to do all of those things if we're, again, ignoring our own experience. I'm not saying be mad or be vindictive, but acknowledge who you are and your own experiences. That is key to healing.
Could it be the other way around too? Can sometimes someone not say that they love someone because they may be ashamed of what they did to the person?
But this person's saying that he's been on his own since he was 17. So I'm assuming that means that he left for a reason and can't say I love you. So left to get away from whatever was happening and then can't say I love you. Like left all of this time and space. Let's say he's 50 years old. So has been away from home for all that time, still can't say I love you. Probably, when I left home when I was 23 and married a guy I'd known 6 months who was 11 years older than me and 3 times divorced, I thought I'd left home, but I hadn't. Right. And so sometimes we can leave home and we think we've left all of that stuff behind, but it's inside of us.
Yeah. Well, actually, you mentioned that he'd never heard it growing up, and but they say it to him now. But he tells it to his kids every day, a million times a day.
Telling it to your kids a million times a day is healing. And again, I will say, if they never said it to you growing up, then there are feelings about that. And you got to find out what the feelings are and work through those feelings to be able to say it. There probably needs to be some forgiveness, but that's, again, at the end of acknowledging your own experience.
Wonderful. Tamara, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. This has been a huge blessing. And I know that it's helped a lot of people on here. And it's still going to help some more people who couldn't make it to the live chat yet, but they'll make it. I'm sure that they'll want to join the next conversation that we have. But thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute blessing for me.
Thank you. If you could just stick around after we end this, just want to thank you further. Familia, thank you so much for joining us on this live chat. I hope that you all have learned something. And if you can let us know, please, what did you learn from this conversation? What is your biggest takeaway? What are you walking away with? Let us know in the comment section down below. And as always, Familia, thank you to our YouTube members and our Patreon partners. And thank you for joining us on this beautiful conversation. We hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much for joining us on this adventure. I thank you. I can't thank you enough for joining us. And as always, continue to spread the love that comes from above, and we'll see you on our next adventure. Peace.